All right, welcome to the share, everyone. My name is Mark. I am your host, and today on the show, I've got a friend in recovery, and his name is Dick. Dick, welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here today.
Absolutely. Now, because nothing ever really goes right on the show, and I forgot your set of headphones, hopefully you'll hear the recovery band. Kick it, boys. They got that phone. And studio audience.
All right.
So, all right, Dick. I saw you in a meeting this morning, and I know you from meetings, but I don't really know much about your story. And we've talked a little bit. And so, can we start with time? How much time in recovery do you have?
Okay, my story's not real different from most people I've known over the years. God granted me the sobriety, July 28th, 1985.
Oh, wow.
All I did was ask for help from a being I couldn't see, touch, smell, nothing. I was blind drunk, had been for several months. And I just asked for help, and I vomited like I did, and I passed out like I did. And I came to a couple hours later. No hangover, first time since the 60s. I remembered everywhere Bob and me and these women had been, and I was a blackout drinker.
Yeah.
100%, ever since the 60s.
Wow.
And don't remember 95% of my life.
Really?
I don't remember. It's never come back other than some glimpses and things that God's let me look at, probably to pre-warn me not to try it again. And I asked for sobriety, and the thought to drink, never to this day has come back, almost 39 years now.
Wow. Well, was that the story you were telling this morning where you got struck sober?
Got struck sober. Absolute struck sober.
Would you tell that story?
Absolutely. I had a neighbor. I live on Lido Beach, and I had a neighbor that was very wealthy, though you wouldn't know it. Bob, had known him for years. All the beach people know each other, the drunks especially.
Yeah.
And to the day he died, Bob could afford much more, but he drove a 65 or 66 hot pink Mustang.
Oh, really?
Convertible with no floor in it.
Okay.
It didn't have a floor. And so when he would pick me up, I'd have to put my feet up on the dashboard so we could drive to wherever we were going. And there used to be a little sandwich shop, a bar, if you will, on Longboat called the Chart House. It's not the restaurant that's out there now, but It was across the street from that a friend of mine and his wife owned. And we'd go out there on Sunday at noon. We called it Sunday school.
You called it Sunday?
That's what we called Sunday school. And we had run into a couple of girls from Canada that were visiting.
Uh-huh.
And brought them with us. And we swore that we'd be good.
Okay.
And all they served at this little joint was beer and wine. Well, I was never much of a wine drinker. And so after we polished off a pitcher, the girls went to the restroom and we snuck in another pitcher. And then from there, things went from bad to worse. We started talking trash to the women, and there happened to be somebody staying at their hotel that was sitting up at the bar talking. And she said, "You girls are staying at the Sheraton Sandcastle." And one of them said, "Yeah." And she says, "I'm staying there as well on the second floor. Can you give us a ride home?" And they left Bob and I. They weren't going to hang with us anymore.
Oh, wow.
And we drank for about another hour and a half. And now, mind you, I started drinking usually about 5:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I kept alcohol in my system pretty much around the clock. And at any rate, Bob was going to take me home about 4:30. And he took me home, and I had a ritual when I was drunk. I had bleeding ulcers, which were incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And now they're buried in booze. And I had a ritual. I'd go home, and I'd vomit blood, and I'd eat 10, 15 aspirin, and drink baking soda and water to neutralize the acid in my system. Mm-hmm. And then I'd pass out for an hour or two, hoping that when I came to, I'd be well enough, if you will, to go out and do the exact same thing again that night. And that was my life.
Yeah.
In this particular day, my eyes caught themselves in this big mirror in the bathroom. And usually I didn't look at myself. I've always been of the opinion that active alcoholics don't like themselves.
Yeah.
I was doing a lot of stuff, obviously, that was highly illegal to begin with, but my parents hadn't raised me that way, and I did them anyway. And anyway, so I vomited, did my thing, passed out, and I came to about 5:30 or 6, and I remember I was laying on my back, and I thought I was dreaming because I remembered where Bob and I had been that day, which was a first. I felt like $1 million. I just felt good. And I thought I'd really messed myself up. And about that time, there's a knock on the door. Well, nobody ever came to see me.
Yeah.
I was unpredictable. And it was a guy I used to drink with 4 or 5 years before. But he'd found this AA thing, and he didn't drink. And I didn't dislike people that didn't drink. I just didn't have anything in common with them. And so here's this guy knocking on my door. And I was surprised, and I opened it up, and he comes in, and he said, I just was in the area, and I thought I'd stop by and see you. He said, how you doing? And I proceeded to tell him what had happened. Vomiting blood, passing out, blah, blah. And I told him, and the entire time I talked, he didn't say one word to me. And when I finished, he looked at me and he said, Dick, there's nothing wrong with you. You are simply suffering from untreated alcoholism.
Really?
And nobody had ever called me an alcoholic. People told me, mostly women and stuff, that I drank too much, but nobody ever said I was an alcoholic. And his next sentence was, would you like to go to a meeting tonight? Well, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, and I just said yes.
Really? That reminds me of that was like Ebby Thatcher and Bill.
And Bill, exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of like, so you hadn't seen this guy in a long time.
Hadn't seen him for a hell of a long time. His name was Dick as well.
Really? And so he just showed up out of nowhere?
Out of nowhere, bangs on my door, which surprised me because it had to be the police or somebody, but it was him, and my life changed.
Wow.
So we go to this meeting. I don't know what it's about, where it is. It turned out it's on the north end of Longboat Key in the Longboat Key Chapel. And what I was to find out, that's a huge meeting on Sunday and Tuesday night. There was well over 80 to 100 people every Sunday and Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so we're walking up the driveway, or not the driveway, the sidewalk to this place. And the parking lot's filled, and I said, I don't think I can go in there. And Dick says, are you sick? I said, no, I'm not sick. I said, I'm just afraid I'll know somebody. I mean, I had not a pot to piss in.
Yeah.
I'd been sued I don't know how many times. I had bones that were broken I didn't know were broken. I was in a lot of trouble. And he said, you will know somebody in here. I'm positive you will. You tore these islands up for years. And so I gathered up my nerve, and we go, and my attorney's sitting 10 feet across the table from me.
Really?
And I damn near died. And he gave me a big thumbs up, and he mouthed the words, thank God. This guy was about 5'5". He used to be a commander, a captain of a submarine in World War II. He's mean as a snake, but he'd been sober a long, long time. And I felt my face turning red, and I thought, man, I got to get out of here. And about that time, Dick pops my shoulder, and he says, there's some seats down here. And I looked down there, and my family physician's sitting there. And
really?
I thought I got to get out of here. This is horrible. And he had reminded me, Dick had reminded me, he said, these people are there for the same reason we're here.
Yeah.
And I don't remember a lot of what they talked about during the meeting, but later on, when somebody like me wandered in, they talked about step one. And that's what we did. And I took my first white chip that night, and they told me to put it in my mouth if I wished, and if I wanted to drink, I could. and if the chip melted, I could drink safely from then on out. I mean, these guys played with me. They messed with me.
So,
But the thing about it that really impressed me, and I don't impress easy, they invited me back again. Nobody ever invited me anywhere anymore because it was up in the air what would happen. I'd shoot you or beat up on you or steal your money or grab your wife or whatever I was going to do.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get invited anywhere, and even my own family steered clear of me. I was just too unpredictable. I could be very nice, I'm sure, or I could just be your worst nightmare. And that's how it all started for me. It was an amazing thing. And a couple of guys had really befriended me those first couple meetings. Ben Kimball and Ken Searson, both deceased now, but Ken had been sober probably 44 years then in 85, and Ben had been sober about 30. And Ben was an interesting guy. He was old as Moses when I got there, and he used to run whiskey for Al Capone.
Really?
This guy could tell you stories you wouldn't believe with pictures to back them up.
Wow.
And they conned me into making coffee.
They conned you?
Conned me. They said it was a very, very sought-after job. There was a very long waiting list, but because these two guys had been there for a very long time, they could pull strings and set it up for next Sunday, but only for next Sunday.
Oh, really?
And they told me to be there at about 5:45.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow. And I got up there about 5:30, sat out in my car, smoked a cigarette. Their cars were there. I went up there, and that's how it started. They had to show me it was a huge meeting. We had 3 of the 100 cup pots. They showed me how to do it. And that's how it was. And so what that did was allow me to get there early, of course, and meet people as they drifted in.
Yeah.
And stay afterwards and clean up. And somebody always stayed to help. There were a number of people. Mm-hmm. And Ken reminded me, he said, always introduce yourself to one person you don't know after every single meeting. And it's some of the most valuable guidance I got. And I've been doing it ever since. And I've sat next to celebrities, world famous people, people that have just come off the streets, porn actresses, businessmen, just an amazing array of people. And I remember saying to Ken one night, how, I like all you people, I really do, but I can't be coming every night. There's stuff I like to watch on TV and have a neighbor I'd like to chase around and blah, blah, blah. And he said, you don't have to come on. And I said, no. And he said, oh, no. He said, you just come until you want to keep coming. And then you never have to show up again. So I'm driving home. I didn't have a car. And this guy's driving me home. And I thought, well, that didn't make a bit of sense. Come to I want to be there, then I don't have to be there. But I understand what he was saying. And it wasn't but within a month that I was actually looking forward to that Tuesday night meeting. These were where my acquaintances were. My friends were there, people that were like me, people that could give me tidbits of advice on how to live. I was 33 years old. I had no clue as to how to live in society. I carried 2 guns. I was unemployable. Things weren't going well for me. And these guys showed me how to live. I didn't know what the laws were. I ignored most of them anyway, but, they showed me how to live, and it took off from there, and I've never looked back. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I've met people that are incredible over the years, not only in Sarasota, but traveling around all over the place, and meetings are the same. We're all the same.
Yeah.
We're just drunks that can't put alcohol into our bodies, and, I go to meetings as often as I can, which in my case is usually every single day at least once. Yeah. And I love them, and I can't imagine my life any other way.
Yeah, meetings are fantastic. Like you were talking about, like, that first meeting when you were like, I can't do this, or you were thinking that. What was the thought in your head? Like, you walk in, you see your lawyer, you see your physician, like, can you explain a little bit more about that thought? Like,
well, what happened is some of the people in the room would reference God. And I didn't have anything against God, but it was a personal type thing for me.
Yeah.
And then I think the coup de grace was when halfway through they start passing the basket collecting money. And I thought, I've fallen into some kind of a cult. Yeah. And they explained to me that no, it wasn't like that at all. If you needed a dollar, take a dollar. If you could put a dollar, take it. And that God would be my own conception. Well, I personally, ever since I was a little boy, I always believed in God. But as my alcoholism progressed, I would call on God in very dangerous situations. And I've been in places and situations, and I'd say, God, get me out of this. And you know darn well that I'll be good after that. And then when the danger was over with, or the police had finished with me, or whatever happened to be, I was back in charge again, making the same stupid decisions, drinking the same 30 beers in the evening and a fifth of whiskey. And, my life was a mess. But
so foxhole prayer in it.
Foxhole prayer in it. And a lot of people do that, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And your concept can be anything you wish it to be. But I know that there's a loving God that has our best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. And he'll stay with us long after we've given up on ourselves. And that's exactly what happened to me. Yeah. Precisely what happened to me. Yeah. So it's an amazing, amazing thing. And I've seen incredible things over the years. Incredible. Mm-hmm. So, I love to go to the meetings, share with other people. Maybe somebody will get something out of it. Maybe they won't. But the bottom line is I stay sober. And so I've had a great day regardless.
There you go.
Period.
Now, do you remember your first sponsor, like getting your first sponsor?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what was that like? And I heard, like, older sponsors usually are kind of, like, more hardcore. Like
He was. Paul had been sober for 15 years when I came in. And these guys kept saying, you got to get a sponsor. Well, I didn't know what that was. I thought maybe it was somebody that, I was $400,000 in debt. I thought, well, maybe they help you out here a little bit.
Yeah, like a financer.
A finance dude. Well, no, it was somebody to guide you through the steps and befriend you and keep what you said to him or her confidential, and not blab it all over the place. And so there was a guy that was at my first meeting, though I didn't meet him that night. His name was Paul. He was about, probably 45 at the time. And he and his wife owned a small mom and pop restaurant up in Manatee County. Okay. But he loved this meeting, and he would always come to it. And so after the meeting, a bunch of us are out front smoking and just talking one night. And I just went up to him, and he said, how do you like AA so far, kid? And I said, I like it. And I just, not of my doing, God's doing. And I said, would you consider being my sponsor? And he said, well, do you think you want to stay sober and live this life? And I said, absolutely. And he said, I tell you what, I'll be your temporary sponsor. And here 39 years later, he's still my temporary sponsor.
That's amazing.
He was a rough, gruff ex-homicide cop from Cleveland, Ohio. He had, during the Vietnam War, they needed mechanics to work on the Huey helicopters, and they promised Paul that he'd stay stateside. They'd teach him how to repair these helicopters that were shot up and stuff. And as the war went on and the casualties were growing, he got orders to report over to Vietnam, and they made him a door gunner. Door gunners weren't cherished positions in Vietnam. Yeah. Their life expectancy wasn't real long, and Paul was a door gunner, and he made it through. But he was a rough, gruff guy, and I didn't like him very much, but by God, I liked what he had. And we ended up becoming the best of friends. We traveled together. We dined together. I knew his wife. Groups of us would get together and go have pizza parties and fireworks parties and all kinds of stuff. And that's kind of how the program works. You know, it's one alcoholic trying to reach out and help another. And a lot of those core guys are still in my life.
Really?
Absolutely. A lot of them live in Manatee County. A lot of them are in Sarasota. A lot of them are down in Venice or Nokomis or wherever. But, I mean, these are lifelong people. In my telephone, I probably have 200 contacts, and the vast majority are AA people. And there's an awful lot of them that aren't even in my telephone. So, you know, it's a lifelong thing. And you're either in AA or you're around AA.
Yeah.
I call the arounders, I call them fringers. They'll show up at a meeting occasionally.
Okay.
I know one girl that shows up once a year to get a red chip. I can't think of anything more selfish in my life.
Yeah. Well, I heard a speaker one time. He's like, either you're in it or you're on it. He's like, if you're in a submarine, if you're in a submarine or on the submarine, when that sub goes down, you're going to know if you're in it or on it.
You're in it or on it. And,
yeah.
And that's the way I've always felt about Alcoholics Anonymous. And my older brother, who's about 2 years older than me, he's been sober a year longer than me.
Really?
And the younger brother was a nightmare. He was into, he could have been a professional baseball player. And he got into not only the alcohol, but he got into all kinds of drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
I never got into the drugs, but David would get into all kinds of stuff. And gradually he lost everything. And one winter in, I think it was 86 or 87, it was freezing cold down here. And I remember he knocked on my door and he said, I'm flat broke, I'm out of gas, I'm hungry. And I knew what he was going to spend the money on. And I gave him $20. And I brought it up at a meeting one night and then talked to my sponsor about it. And Ken said, working with family is very difficult, and you're going to have to cut him loose. And I said, Ken, he's my younger brother. Ken said, I know it. I've been in the same deal before. And so when he came back to my door again a week or 10 days later, drunk, he asked if he could stay at my place on the beach for just a few days. And I said, yeah, I guess so, but no alcohol, no drugs, period. And one afternoon I came home early. I had gotten a migraine headache, first one in many years. And I walk into my apartment and there's marijuana all over this big table by the front window. And he was rolling joints. And I go in, and all the stuff out of our refrigerator, or most of it, was gone, and he's got cases of Heineken beer in there.
Oh, you replaced the food?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I went off like a rocket, and I said, you get your stuff and you go. He said, you can't throw me out. It's 42 degrees. I'm your brother. And I did just what I was advised. I gave him $50, and I gave him a blanket, and I said, good luck. And he knew I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, so it broke my heart to do it. But, you know, about 10 days later, I'm there one afternoon, and there's a knock on my door, and it's David. And he said, do you still go to those meetings? And I said, yeah. And he said, I think I'd like to go. And it started off rough. Family doesn't work with family as a rule, but I bent the rules a little bit. And he's now been sober about 34 years.
Wow, so cutting him off was the key.
Cutting him off was the key, but it is so hard to do. But I did. And that's just the way it played out for there. It was just, I didn't get him sober. God got him sober. All I did was plant that little mustard seed, and it took off, just as it had for me in 1985. And it's just been that way ever since. And, you know, to this very day, I got a good life today, nothing real exciting. I could hop on a plane and go to Europe if I want and all that, but I don't have any desire for all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I keep to myself. I like my downtime. I like being alone. I read. I hang with a lot of AA people and other people as well, of course. My daughter is 26. Of course, I was sober years before she was born, but she likes hanging around with me sometimes. Yeah. And we get together a lot. And so it's just been a great, great journey, and it'll continue to be so if I uphold my end of the bargain.
Okay.
You know, I leave here today. Can I afford to buy a case of whiskey or and a case of beer, which would get me through till maybe Monday morning. Yeah, I sure could. But once again, I'd have the common denominator all of us have. I would have trouble.
Yeah,
Trouble would show up. Believe me.
Trouble does show up.
Trouble
for people
shows
like
up.
us.
And it never was any different whether I was here or in Kentucky or West Virginia or wherever I happened to be.
Yeah.
But I mean, being a blackout drinker adds gas to the fire. I mean, waking up on planes, I didn't even know where the hell I was.
Really?
Constantly. I can't tell you how many times I woke up with these different girls, whether it was in Florida or elsewhere. The vast majority of them were married, but I didn't even know their names. I just came to, and there they were. Or I'd wake up with one morning when I lived on Madeira Beach up in St. Pete. I woke up one morning and there was 4 $100 bills sitting on my television, and I had a big cut on my right arm, and there's no possible way I had $400 to my name. And God knows to this day, I don't know how I got that big cut, but I guess I thumped somebody on the head. I don't know what I did. If I needed money, I took yours, and
Yeah.
and that was a way. That's a hell of a way to live. God, that's a tough way to live.
Yeah. That's
Man.
now doing the steps. You had to look at all that stuff.
Oh,
was
God,
was that difficult for you looking at all that?
It was very difficult, especially when it came to the 4th step. And
Yeah.
I advocate doing the 4th step like it's graphed out in the big book, or at least the 3rd edition's what I have.
Yeah.
There's a graph, and what was my part in it? How it affect me? Who I have a resentment to? Well, I was a blackout drinker, and so I didn't remember, and to this day don't remember the vast majority of it. But as I sat there and prayed by myself in total peace and quiet, a few names started popping up, and it was like somebody else took my hand and wrote out what I was angry about and how it affected me. And it affected my pocketbook. It affected my self-esteem, my self-worth. It affected all that stuff. And then after that, I had made up my mind there's no way I can do a 5th step with Paul, even that, well, first of all, he was a retired cop, and he sure had cop friends and stuff. So I couldn't do a 5th step. There's just no way I could do it, because I had statutes of limitations that hadn't expired on me in Pinellas County. But I knew with him it would be, he wouldn't say anything about it. It was between he and I. And I sat down in a pizza parlor on Holmes Beach one night with just me and Paul, and I let out as much as I could, or as much as I thought I could. And he sat there and he never made any comments. He told me a few things about himself, and that was it. But I was there probably 3 hours with him. And I don't know, the big key to this sobriety thing is to keep in touch with a God that you understand, that you're friends with. God's heard it all before.
Yeah.
And like I said in a meeting one time, I said, if you don't know all the words you think you need to say, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. God understands what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
And I mean, these old timers, Christ, they had an answer for everything. I couldn't get around anything with these guys.
Did it blow your mind? You're like, what?
Oh, I'm like, how do these guys know me? And, and that's just the way it worked for me and countless others I've known over the years.
Yeah.
One thing about me that was, and is still a problem in a sense, it doesn't bother me a lot, but I was one of these people that was born with no fear button. In other words, if somebody was shooting at me or pulled a gun on me, I didn't care. It was a big game to me.
Is that what you're saying? You've been shot up and beat up?
Oh, God. And I didn't care. But one thing that terrified me for the first 5 years anyway was, mostly in Florida, but even out of state, a woman coming up to me and saying, "Hey, Dick, do you remember me?" And I'll be damned if I wasn't out in Flagstaff, Arizona. in a 200-year-old church on Bacon Street, up on the side of a mountain, 2,500 miles from here. I don't know anybody in Flagstaff, Arizona. And I'm standing there, and this girl from the back of the room yells out my name. And it was like somebody threw a knife at me.
Oh,
I'm like,
no.
you know. And I turned around, and it was this girl. And the thing that was unusual about her was she was about 6'2", but perfect proportions, stunningly beautiful. And I had met her the last time I was in Arizona, and she rode bronco horses in rodeos.
Really?
And still did that.
Wow.
And she remembered me. And we went and had a cup of coffee and chatted after the meeting and whatnot. But it's those kind of little God shots,
Yeah.
I call them God shots.
The God shots are great.
Oh, they're fabulous, and they happen a lot, too.
Yeah.
And they happen, and I couldn't believe it. And we sat there and chatted, and years later, I ran into her again. I had gotten married finally, and Denise and I were out there. She had never seen the Grand Canyon, so we did all that stuff and ended up at that meeting in Arizona. And so I was able to introduce Denise and her, and that was a cool thing. And it's stuff like that that happens. And you know, I don't know why it kind of surprises me these days when this stuff happens after all these years, but it doesn't surprise me. It's God working.
Yeah.
God will do for you what you never even dreamed of. And as I said in the meeting, you know, if you go pray for $10 million, no. Could he give it to you? Absolutely. Will he? Probably not.
Yeah.
But he'll keep you sober and relatively happy if you ask and you really mean it. And the main thing is for me is to treat other people like I want to be treated.
Yeah.
I have nothing against anybody, Muslims or colored guys or Vietnamese. I have nothing against anybody unless they show their hand first and mean me harm or a member of my family. That's a different story.
Yeah.
I've only been in that situation once in all the time I've been here, and he backed off, fortunately, because I don't know what would have happened. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's a good way to live. It's a fabulous way to live.
It is.
And more are coming in young, and this drugs thing, fentanyl, and all these other drugs. I never did drugs, but they're killing people left and right.
They are. It just happened to a guy I know in the fellowship. He went out, fentanyl got him, and it was in something.
I don't know whether you snort that or drink it. I don't know how
Well,
you work
it's a cutting agent. Some people do it straight, but they put it in the drugs to cut and to make profit. So that's, you know what I mean.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's like, you know, drugs are cut with stuff. Now you were never. You said you were always an alcohol guy. You weren't really a drug guy.
No.
And now Now I've heard people in AA, and it's mostly sometimes like more older hardcore people say like oh well it's Alcoholics Anonymous, like we keep it just to alcohol. But I noticed in the big book they talk about drugs and
Absolutely.
alcohol.
Bill Wilson got into drugs.
Acceptance is the answer. That
It's
story's
the
about the guy that shoots up.
Now, if I'm chairing a meeting, and I have, as recent as about a year and a half ago at a big meeting I go to have been for a long time, and all of a sudden he just starts talking about his difficulty quitting smoking. That's an outside issue. That has nothing to do with alcohol.
Okay.
And I told him that a group of us would get together after the meeting, and you use the same principles in the book for smoking or whatever, gambling, whatever it is. All these anonymous, Sex Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, all that stuff's based on these 12 steps anyway.
Yeah, the only difference is the first part of the first step in other fellowships.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you're into that stuff, you're in for a real rude awakening.
Yeah.
At some point in time, it'll catch you. And, you're going to be in a trouble you can't even believe.
Well, it's easy to play musical poisons when I notice when I'm sober. Like, okay, I'm feeling depressed. I notice I'll eat my feelings.
Absolutely.
Right.
You stuff them. Alcoholics are great at that.
I could become a spendaholic, right?
Yep.
I could spend that money if I have it,
Yep.
if I'm trying to mask mood. But that's where the 12 steps come into play in my life.
Yep.
Like, it seems like things are a little bit more stable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was one of these guys that was born a natural drummer.
Really?
Yes, and my older brother was born a natural trumpet player. And
You were a drummer?
oh yeah,
Really?
I played with a couple of top name bands filling in for him, and
Oh,
we had our own band as well. We're real popular. And one time I was asked to fill in for a well-known group. Their drummer had been out on a tear, or he had the flu, or whatever it is.
So you were a hired gun.
Yeah, I was a hired gun, so I played with these guys, and they're nice. They were nice enough guys, but geez, they were into dope and you name it. Plus, they traveled all the time.
Yeah.
Are they wealthy? Yeah, to say the least, they're wealthy.
Yeah.
But traveling the country, playing drums and getting screwed up, no, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And I thanked him very much, but I told him I couldn't.
Yeah.
And that was it. And I ended up and kept in touch with one or two of them, and it wasn't the path for me. It wasn't the path I was supposed to take.
Yeah.
Would I still be sober today if I'd signed on with them as a fill-in? I don't know. Temptations on the road, or people loved me. They didn't even know who the hell I was.
Yeah, that's a lot of temptation.
God.
Yeah, I can really, like, drums was my first instrument.
Oh.
And I would aspire, I wanted to tour and play guitar and all that, and gave it a little shot at it. But there is a lot of temptation in that industry.
Unbelievable.
I don't see how guys get sober and stay sober in that.
I don't know, but a lot of them are.
Yeah.
And God bless them. One of my old bandmates has always, if you look on any of Dolly Parton's albums, Sean, he had gotten married and had some kids and stuff. He lives in Nashville, but he plays on all of her albums and things like that, but he won't tour.
Yeah.
And he, of course, makes a good living doing that for her.
Session player.
But he was in my band for a long, long time.
Man, that's
Shane
awesome.
Keister, what a great guy. And so, yeah, it just wasn't the life for me. Where I am is exactly how it is. The literature talks about nothing, absolutely nothing happening in God's world by mistake. And the longer I'm sober, the more I believe it. That's in the doctor's opinion. And he was a piece of work. That doctor in there, he was something else. I met he and his wife. And they were here speaking at a convention about 20 years ago. And I got to meet him. And as a matter of fact, in my original big book, which I still have, I have Joe and Charlie signed it from a convention I was at, 20 years ago. Both those guys signed it.
Really?
Yeah, I still have that at home. Joe and Charlie.
What was it like meeting those guys?
Oh, those guys are unbelievable.
I love their tapes.
Oh, they're unbelievable. And I've gone to probably maybe 6 or 7 of their workshops with them, with those two guys. And they're astounding. They're funny as hell.
Yeah.
They know the big book front and center. They know it. And one thing that's a little amazing, people will say stuff that they hear in a meeting. They'll parrot somebody, and a lot of times it's inaccurate. And I was in a meeting about a week ago, and a guy visiting from another area introduced himself, his first name, and he said he was a real alcoholic. And I remember back to my 3rd or 4th speaker meeting, this guy owned an air conditioning company, and he introduced himself as a real alcoholic. And I said to the guy with me, I said, as if I'm not. and so when this guy said that the other day, 2 or 3 people made reference to it, to their table mates.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to one of them yet, but I just refer them either in the 3rd or the 4th. Go to page 21.
Yeah.
There's three types of alcoholics.
Yeah, what about the real alcoholic?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what about the real alcoholic?
What about the real alcoholic?
He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he drinks. Here is a fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Absolutely.
He is seldom mildly intoxicated.
Yep, that was me. And Bill Wilson put it the best. This book, the original Big Book was written in 1937, published in 39. And in 1937, Bill Wilson wrote, talking about himself only, alcohol had ceased being a luxury. It had become a necessity.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. I could flirt with the girls and dance with the girls and fight people or whatever I wanted to do after I'd had 8 or 10 drinks, mixed or beer, whatever I was drinking. And when I developed these bleeding ulcers, which are horrifically painful.
And you developed those because of drinking?
Yeah, drinking.
Yeah.
And stress. And but it wasn't a question of was I going to drink. I had to drink. And I knew I was not being real smart. I had a prominent management position with a big drug company in St. Pete. And I'd get up at 5:30, 5 in the morning, 5:30, and start drinking whiskey and beer while I read the St. Petersburg Times before I went to my work in the drug business.
Really?
What the hell's that all about?
Yeah.
That was me.
So it was a necessity at that point.
It was a necessity. I had to drink.
No, you know, Bill Wilson, like this big book, like I love the here. Have you seen this? This is my first big book. This is my first year and a
It's got
half.
some mileage on it.
Yeah, it is. And I said I'd read it till the doctor didn't have an opinion anmore, and it's fallen out of the book.
It's falling apart.
Yeah, my dad looked at it and he's like, what edition is that? and then that was a few months ago, and then he looked at me. I was had the opportunity to give him his 42 years. At the beginning of the month, and he looks at that and he's like, "Is that new?" And I'm like, "No, that's how they're selling them now." So it looks like you've done the actual.
You got some mileage on that one. That's a good thing.
Yeah, right. But the way Bill Wilson writes in this book, and when I first saw the big book, I was like, I don't want to read that thing. Like all the answers are in that, really, and it's true. But the way he writes fascinates me, especially his story.
Oh yeah,
yeah, like all these chapters, the way that he pinpoints so many things. I'm like, that's me.
He was a word freak. Bill Wilson was a word freak.
Yeah.
And in one of the chapters, it's to the wives, that aggravates the hell out of a lot of women. And the reason being is because those terms, back then are very different than they are now.
Yeah.
Bill talks about looking at the gay crowd inside. Well, if you say, well, geez, I looked in that window, there's a gay crowd. It's like, well, a bunch of gay guys are gay women.
Yeah.
No, but back then it was the happy people having fun and getting
happy.
Screwed up. And so he uses a lot of words and terms that aggravate women, but damn it was written in the 30s.
Yeah. Well, I like To the Wives, and there's a reason I like it. It's because there was a guy in a meeting that said, I really don't like To the Wives. And I was like, I think I know why. And I laid out, I said, because when I read To the Wives in the beginning, when he's describing the alcoholic, it's kind of like looking in a mirror, and on one side is my partner, and on the other side is Bill Wilson telling her about me.
Exactly.
Like taking my freaking inventory.
Taking your inventory.
And it's, To the Wives is a great description of the alcoholic.
Absolutely. And everything in there is it's astounding. And my older brother, the one that got sober about a year before me, he was high up in the government and going to the White House and doing all that kind of stuff for a lot of years. And he socialized and worked with a number of people that you see on television.
Yeah.
And, traveled all over the place. And he was playing golf with a real popular guy at the time. He's passed away now, Tip O'Neill. And they were out playing golf one day up in the D.C. area, and Tip turned around to my brother and he said, when it's all said and done, history will record that Alcoholics Anonymous is probably one of the greatest gifts God ever gave to mankind. And I truly believe it.
Well, if you look at how like you reading here how the fellowship started, like Bob meeting Bill and Abby coming to and an Oxford group, and it's fascinating. And some of the language that can I read to you the passage in here that really got me going in the big book?
Yeah.
And it was on 101. 100 to 101. Assuming we are spiritually fit, we can do all sorts of things alcoholics are not supposed to do. People have said we must not go where liquor is served. We must not have in our homes. We must shun friends who drink. But this was the line. We must avoid moving pictures. I'm like, these guys, no, and it goes on. But then here was the line that really got me. We must avoid moving pictures which show drinking scenes. We must not go into bars. Our friends must hide their bottles if we go into their houses. We mustn't think of reminded of alcohol at all. Our experience shows this is not necessarily so. We meet these conditions every day. An alcoholic who cannot meet them still has an alcoholic mind. There is something matter with the spiritual status. This was the line. His only chance for sobriety would be someplace like the Greenland ice cap, and even there an Eskimo might turn up with a bottle of scotch and ruin everything. But then I was, talking like, oh, we completed a JAG, we got moving pictures. Like this book is phenomenal.
It is phenomenal. It really is truly phenomenal, and it's God inspired. There's absolutely no doubt in my mind. And again, as I'll say in meetings sometimes, that's my opinion only. My opinion. Yeah. Maybe not this guy, but it's my opinion. And I kind of really have sympathy for people that have problems coming to terms with a higher power. I was working with a guy a few months ago. He's been in AA 3 years, and he just can't come to believe that there's something greater than him. And I said to him after a meeting one night, I said, Don, what are you doing in an AA meeting? You just walk in here? Did a judge send you? Did your wife bitch at you? You just have a revelation that you're drinking too much? He said, yeah, that's it. I just had a revelation. I've been in thousands of AA meetings in countless places, and I have never, ever seen a man or woman walk into AA accidentally. Ever.
Oh, yeah.
Ever.
Yeah, I had a friend of mine that says, a normal person just doesn't wake up one day and is like, hey, you know what? No. Sounds great today, an AA meeting.
God sends you there.
Yeah, coming to believe, coming to believe is such a personal thing for people.
Absolutely.
And it's and for me it's personal, for you it's personal, and it's sometimes quickly and sometimes slowly. I remember when I came to believe, and I think we were talking about that in a meeting. We were in a meeting together when we were talking about that. Can I ask you, how did you come to believe?
I came to believe when early on I was, parroting people, if you will.
Okay.
And saying stuff that older people had said. And I said to an old timer one night, Paul was out of town, my sponsor, and I said to this guy, I said, I'm really having trouble with this third step, And he said, well, the reason you're having trouble with the third step is you never did the second step. I said, sure I did. He said, no, you didn't. And he told me precisely in 5 seconds what to do. He knew I lived alone. He said, you go home, no television, no stereo, no nothing. Get down on your knees and you think back honestly to the day you walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was Sunday, July 28, 1985. And that's the day in 1985 I asked God that if he was out there floating around somewhere to get me out of the lifestyle I'd gotten into. And I got struck sober, and that desire and thought, sick feeling of drinking, never to this very day in 2024 has ever come back. And that's the night I came to believe somebody out there has my back. And it was God.
So you realized that after the fact that you had come to believe?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And that happens sometimes, delayed reactions.
Yeah.
And that's the night, it was early on, but yeah, I came to believe that there was a power greater than myself. I choose to call him God. I think he likes to be called God. But there's Hindus and Muslims and all these other different religions. They call it whatever they want. It doesn't matter. It's finding a power by which you can live and by which will solve your problem. And that's what happened to me. And most people I know in Alcoholics Anonymous that are fortunate enough to come across a higher power I mean, Christ, I should have been dead in the 60s. Not hurt, not have my ass kicked. Dead.
Wow.
And I did die once after many years of sobriety.
Really?
I just didn't want to go to work one day. There wasn't anything wrong. I wasn't sick or anything like that. And I got up and I did what I always did. I'm drinking a cup of coffee and smoking a cigarette. And all of a sudden it occurred to me how hot it was in the house. And I thought, well, Denise must have turned the air conditioner way up because she'd get cold. I go look at it, it's 72 degrees in the house. And we didn't usually keep it 72 even. We kept it 74. But I'm pouring sweat and whatnot. And what had happened is that God needed me, I think, to concentrate on his power. And so he gave me what the cardiologists call a widowmaker. And I was dead before I hit the floor. Dead.
And you're still here.
I'm still here. God doesn't want me dead. So they brought me around with the paddles and all that stuff. And they sent me to a hospital, the closest one, and they didn't do open heart surgery. And everything was like 98% clogged and closed up. And they sent me to the hospital. And I was in surgery almost 9 hours, and I came out of it. And I'd had 5 bypasses. I had IVs going in both arms. And I remember the surgeon popped in the next morning early. And he explained what they had done. And I said, what the hell caused this? And he said, well, not really knowing much about you, just what you've told me. He said it wasn't the Big Macs you ate or the cigarettes you smoked. He said it was stress. And I remember you told me you drank a lot at one time. And I said, yeah, like you can't believe. He said your esophagus is all burnt up. You stressed your heart to the max. And that's what happened. And so, I couldn't do anything for, a couple of months and stuff. But, and incidentally, I had I got diagnosed 6 or 8 weeks ago with cancer, esophagus, some in my liver, nodules in my lungs. I'm on chemotherapy now, but they said the same thing after that PET scan, which literally shows everything in you. They said, you damaged your esophagus, and the oncologist said, do you drink? And I said, I don't drink alcohol. And she said, well, at some point in time you drank, and you drank a hell of a lot more than you probably should have. And I said, yeah, I haven't had a drink in 30-some years. And she goes, well, the damage is still there. And that's where the cancer has attacked. I tore myself up drinking. I mean, I'm one of these guys. I did not sit and sip white wine at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I drank like a damn pig, and if you got in my way, then we were going to butt heads.
Yeah.
And that's the way it was. So alcohol will tear you apart. You'll think, Jesus, I'm having a wonderful time drinking and going out and getting laid and getting a new job and doing this and that. That's great. Keep it up.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these days we'll have a seat for you in here. And alcohol will tear you apart. You'd never see it coming.
Yeah.
It blindsided me.
Yeah.
I was having a hell of a time traveling around doing all the stuff I wanted to do, and kaboom. God said, So he delivered a good heart attack for me. That's what all this big scar is all the way down me, open heart surgery.
Now, do you remember your first drink?
No.
No.
But I was about probably 14 or 15. But I remember one of the guys in the neighborhood had stolen some Mogan David wine. His family was Jewish, and I guess they drink that for their holidays.
Yeah.
And somebody else had stolen some cans of Schlitz. And we go in one of the alleys up there, one of the back alleys in a garage. The car wasn't there. The people must have been working or something. And we were all big shots. There's 4 or 5 of us. And I remember I took a sip of that Mogan David wine, and that stuff, I wouldn't feed that to a prisoner of war. That is awful stuff.
My dad talks about that was his first drink.
And then I took a few, splashes of the Schlitz beer, and I think there was another kind of beer we had, but I couldn't stand the taste of any of that stuff. And probably the other guys couldn't either. But we were big shots. And
what was the effect?
you get that warm feeling and your confidence comes. And I played baseball at the time. And I thought, boy, I wish we had a game tonight. Man, I could probably hit it out over center field. It's that false bravado which alcohol gives you.
Drunk, right? I'm going to hit it up over the fence.
Oh, yeah. And later as you get older and drunker and whatnot like that, you're 10 feet tall and you're bulletproof.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd wander into these neighborhoods in St. Pete that you don't want to wander into, but that's what I did. And you start trouble with people and, but alcohol tells you it's okay. It justifies it. I told a girl after a speaker meeting a couple of years ago, I said, alcohol didn't make my decisions for me, but alcohol justified them.
Oh.
If I stole your money or knocked you in the head or screwed your wife or crashed your car, it was okay. Alcohol told me it was okay.
Because you were drunk.
I was drunk. Oh, what a way to live.
Oh, man.
Not for me anymore.
Good. Dick, now you have a power greater than yourself in life, and you have that you choose to call God.
Absolutely.
And you have a fellowship. And you have all these things in your life now, and you've been sober a long time. When they told you about the cancer, what was, how have you been applying the fellowship in the program of AA to this?
Yeah, I've had a number of people, again, mostly women, and my daughter, that I guess they have a preconceived notion that I should be terrified. I'm not terrified. I'm not afraid of dying. I never have been afraid of dying. If God wants me to get through this because of modern medicine, I'll get through it. Mm-hmm. And I said in a meeting last week, if he cancels my ticket today, hey, I've had a great run. Maybe help somebody along the way. Who knows?
Yeah.
Not afraid of it at all.
I've heard
Is it a pain in the ass? Yes, it's a pain in the ass. I got to go Tuesday and get plugged in up here for 6 hours. Then I have to wear, I call it my papoose. That's more chemo shooting into me. I got to wear that for 2 days.
Man.
And it's a pain in the ass. But I have an old friend in sobriety. She's been sober 55 years. She lives up in Tennessee now. And I was listening to she and her husband Bob speak one night in the 80s. And when she closed her lead, she said, what I've come to realize over all these years of being sober is that sometimes it's just your turn. It's your turn for your mom to die. It's your turn to lose a child. It's your turn to get wealthy. Yeah. It's your turn to crash a car. It's your turn to die. It's your turn. So it's my turn.
Yeah. God
will get me through it or he won't. But I've had a great run.
Well, I heard you talk about acceptance one time, and at the end of 420.
Yep.
Acceptance is the key to my relationship with God today. I never just sit and do nothing while waiting for him to tell me what to do with it. I do whatever is in front of me to be done. I leave the results up to him. However it turns out, that's God's will for me. I must keep my magic magnifying mind on my acceptance and off my expectations, for my serenity is directly proportional to my level of acceptance. When I remember this, I can see that I never had it so good. Thank God for AA.
Absolutely.
So total acceptance.
Total acceptance, no matter what happens. And that's the way it is. And I'd like to see 2 family members be able to get it. And so far, it hadn't worked out. They're not drunks or drug addicts, but they worry about what I call the wreckage of the future, what might happen in June.
Yeah.
Christ, we're not even close to June yet.
Yeah, future trip is what they call that. Yeah.
I don't worry about anything. If I stay sober and I hit the pill tonight at 12 o'clock and I'm sober, it doesn't matter what's happened during the day.
Yeah.
Tragic or otherwise. I've had a damn good day. God's watched over me. I've been to a meeting. I've done a podcast, which I've never done before. I've had a good day, regardless. Yeah. Regardless.
Yeah. You stayed sober. You didn't pick up a drink.
Didn't pick up a drink.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me one night, a 14-year-old girl I was working with one time briefly. I'd introduced her to a lot of women, but she lived closer to me. She couldn't drive, but yeah, I'd take her to meetings periodically. And we went into it's not there anymore. This is years ago. There used to be a little store called Simple Sam's on Osprey and Siesta Drive. And she wanted to know, we were going to be at the meeting 20 minutes before it started, and she asked if she could go get a popsicle in this place. And I said, yeah, that's fine. So we whip in there, and she comes in. I go in with her, and the popsicles are in the back, and we walk past this 20-foot long cooler with quarts and 6-packs of all kinds of beer. Mm-hmm. And so she gets her popsicle, and we get back out in the car heading out to the meeting, and she said, what would happen if you bought one of those quarts of beer? And I said, you mean, and drink it? And she goes, yeah. And I said, I don't know. It might not do anything. Or I might drink it, dump you off, and go stock up my car, and then go home and strap my guns on. I don't know what will happen. I never knew what was happening, what was going to happen when I drank. Usually there's trouble. But sometimes I'd just go home and be good.
Yeah.
Watch TV, fall or pass out, actually. But, I don't know what would happen. It's very unpredictable. Everybody's so different.
Yeah.
It's not for me. And I don't dabble with it. I don't play with it. I don't dream about it. I don't do anything about it. And I take care of me. God takes care of me. I'm good. If I can help somebody else, that's just wonderful. If I can't, I'm still sober. Yeah. I've had sponsees commit suicide. I had a guy I sponsored in the 80s. He gave it what Brad called it the old college try. And
what, recovery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd been sober 90 days the day before, and we were going to a meeting, me and another guy. And Brad told us on the way up to Anna Maria's, go give it the old college try. And we laughed and said, you don't want to do that. Well, back then, when I got sober, there weren't cell phones or anything. But about 3 days later, I kept calling Brad and getting his answering machine. And Rollin called me one night. He was real well off, and he had homes all over the country. And he called me. He happened to be at one he had up in New Jersey. And he called me up, and he said, did you hear what happened to Brad? And I said, no, I've left messages. He's never gotten back to me. I haven't seen him at meetings. He said, well, and you won't. And I said, what happened? And he said, you used to drink in St. Pete, right? And I said, yeah, I tore St. Petersburg apart. He said, well, he went up in your old neck of the woods near, is it Stetson University? I said, yeah, that's over right out of Gulfport in Pasadena. He said, well, the police were chasing him. He was blind drunk. And he was heading out to one of the islands, which in that case would have been St. Pete Beach.
Yeah.
And the police were after him, and he lost control. He was going over 90 miles an hour, and he jumped a retaining curb on the causeway and killed 9 people. 8 full-grown humans, and one of the girls, they were from Massachusetts, and one of the girls was, 5, 6 months pregnant, so they counted that as a person.
And he lived?
Brad lived. All the people were killed, and to this very, very day, March 18th, 2024, he's still in Rayford. He'll never get out. 9 counts of vehicular homicide.
Wow.
And so I remember going to a meeting that Tuesday night, and I said to Ken Searson, I said, Jesus, what a dumbass. And Ken shook his head, and he said, just remember, my friend, that dumbass could be you tomorrow. Never forgot that.
Wow.
That could be me.
Well, we hear about this, things, people going back out. Hey, did you hear about so-and-so? Yep. Yeah, they're not coming back.
No, they're not coming back. And he'll never come back. He'll never come back. He's in prison for life. And he'll never get out. He had everything. He'd inherited a huge condominium on Longboat, quite a lot of money, sports cars, a nice girlfriend from Asia. He had everything. And it went that quick.
Wow. That makes me think of 327 it's in the personal stories, and it says material losses don't necessarily indicate alcoholism, material gains don't necessarily indicate sobriety.
Nope.
It's
a sad thing, but it happens absolutely constantly.
Yeah. Man. Well, Dick, I want to thank you for your service today. like you sitting here and telling some of your story and your journey in recovery has been absolutely amazing. I'm honored to sit down with you and to talk with you, and I can't thank you enough.
I appreciate you inviting me. I've never been on a podcast
Never?
before. No, ever. These weren't around for a long time.
I know, and I feel bad. I forgot your headphones. I can hear you right here.
Oh, no, I don't care.
Yeah, but it's it's a good way. Just to get the word out, and and people in recovery listen to this, and it feels good to do service.
How do you find the podcast on your computer? I have a desktop at home and of course a phone, but I can't remember. I think I accidentally deleted that thing you sent me, that link.
Yeah. I'll that's an outside issue, and I'll talk to you after the meeting about
send
that.
it to me. I'd like to.
So I got a couple questions before we wrap this up. No, I'll show you after the meeting how to get on this. I'll resend you.
I'm computer illiterate.
I am too sometimes. So it's so a couple of things I want to ask you before we end here. What are you grateful for today?
Grateful that I have a loving relationship with a God that I understand. Grateful for my sobriety. Number one on the list would be relationship with God. Obviously grateful for my sobriety. If I didn't have my sobriety, I'd have literally nothing. God comes first, sobriety second, my family third. Period. It has to be that way.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me recently, well, how about Morgan? That's my daughter. If I don't have sobriety, I don't have Morgan.
Yeah.
I had to raise her. Her mother died. And she's real smart. Morgan has an IQ of about 145. She is off the charts.
Wow.
And one night we were going to dinner and we passed a big bar down on Bee Ridge Road. And they had a sign out front. It was about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. And it said, "Have you tried our new pumpkin beer?" And my daughter said, "Daddy, did you ever drink pumpkin beer?" I said, "I don't know, Morgan, maybe." And we got down to the next red light, and I said, "I'm going to pull in that Shell station and U-turn, and I'm going to go back and get a case of that pumpkin beer and see if I really do like it." And she goes, "Well, I know you're rich and you can do what you want." But she said, "If you get a case of pumpkin beer, you're never seeing me again."
Whoa.
I mean, she knows my story.
Yeah.
She's been coming to meetings with me since I carried her in the little baby carrier thing. And by God's grace, she's excelled in school, graduated college, summa cum laude, never drank, never smoked, never did any of that stuff.
She grew up in AA.
Yep, she grew up in AA.
Wow.
And if that isn't a gift from God, I don't know what is.
That's
people
beautiful.
say, "Well, Jesus, if I had $10 million, what are you going to do with $10 million? You can't spend it." Well, unless you're an idiot and you buy a hotel or something, but you got God in your life, you got it.
That's
Period. Do I go to church? Nope.
yeah.
I give to a lot of charities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't go to church. God knows I love him and I depend on him. If I don't have him, I'm done. I
Yeah.
am absolutely done. And I
is
will
good.
guarantee you,
Yeah.
just as if I went out and drank this afternoon, probably before midnight, but certainly before dawn, I'd be dead or incarcerated
Yeah.
because I'd get back to my old self again. And that wasn't good.
Yeah, isn't it wild to look back at like go from not a God guy to a God guy?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that's and here's the second thing I wanted to ask you. We always end these things this way. The newcomer. What do you got for the newcomer who might be listening today?
People give you telephone numbers. Rarely do newcomers call you. Use them. If you get an answering machine, leave a message, go to the next number. Read the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, how it works, and plan your day around a meeting. "Well, I don't have time, I'm busy." Bullshit.
Yeah.
I drank 9 to 10 hours a day in a bar. And at home, of course, it was always hurricane season. So I had enough at home to last 3-4 months anyway.
Yeah.
You have time for a meeting. You plan your day around a meeting. Period. Introduce yourself to one person minimum you don't know after every single meeting. You may not remember his or her name, doesn't matter. You build a network. You build a web of security.
Yeah.
Period. Get into the literature. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, I can't sleep at night. Pull out your big book.
Oh, you'd be sleeping.
Doesn't matter where you open it. Just open it. Start reading something. You fall asleep. Nobody ever died of lack of sleep. Ever.
I did. I started doing that in recovery when I couldn't sleep. I was like, maybe I should put it on the phone, and I started picking up the damn big book.
Absolutely. Mine's marked up with asterisk and all that too.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is the new one I'm breaking down for a new experience.
There you go.
Yeah, it's all wrapped up with notes. I heard a speaker one time. He said, "Nobody's busier than the newcomer."
Oh yeah. We have several newcomers at a couple of the meetings I go to that are really doing good.
Yeah,
one of them's very well off financially. He doesn't have to work.
Yeah.
And he's at a meeting every single day, at least once, sometimes twice. Another guy that's doing real well is a new one at the Evening Covenant you introduced me to.
Yeah.
He's doing great. Several in the noon. I go to the noon meeting sometimes at 12 o'clock down at the Covenant. New people in there that are doing good. Unfortunately, a couple of the girls got well recently.
Oh.
And their lives aren't going so good right now.
Yeah.
But, if you want it, you have it free. Free of charge. Best gift you'll ever have in your life.
It's beautiful.
If you don't want it, hey, it's fine. Nobody will force you to take it.
Yeah. Well, Dick, thank you so much for your service today. And look, the recovery band's going to take us out. They're going to kick the funk. Are you ready?
Go.
Takes you back to the 70s. And the studio audience. Standing ovation. It's great. All right, Dick, thank you so much for your service today.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Glad
Goodbye.
I came.
Goodbye, everyone, and be well.